Okay, good day everyone. So, in the previous meeting we talked about quadratic equations. And a quadratic equation has three terms. A quadratic term which is composed of variables raised to the exponent of 2 or any variable that is the highest degree is 2. That is considered as quadratic term. Then followed by a linear term which is terms that has an exponent or the highest exponent is equal to 1. And lastly, the constant term which is composed of numbers or constant, numerical value for the constants. Then, aside from that three terms, there are also three ways in solving quadratic equation. The first one is factoring, that is the one na atong discussed last meeting, solving quadratic equation using factoring. And the other one is by the use of completing the square, and lastly, the quadratic formula. So the only two ways, okay, so the only two ways in solving quadratic equation is by the use of factoring and completing the square. So quadratic formula is na formulate ang quadratic formula because of the completing the square. But the main ways in solving quadratic equation is by the use of factoring and completing the square. So this morning, we're going to talk about quadratic equation, or how we're going to find the solutions of quadratic equation by the use of completing the square. Completing the square. Okay. So there are some equations, there are some quadratic equation that dili nato siya pwede ma-factor out. Meaning, dili nato siya pwede magamitan ng factoring. Then that's the time that we're going to use another way or another method in solving quadratic equation, and that is completing the square. Okay, like for example, we have this x squared plus or minus 5x plus 3, which is equal to 0. So let's have this kind of equation, x squared minus 5x plus 3. So before we are going to evaluate what method we are going to use this one, let's try to evaluate first if this is a quadratic equation. Okay, so since the first term of this equation is x squared, where the highest exponent is 2, then this equation is considered as quadratic equation. Okay, so going back to factoring, the difference between factoring and completing the square. So based on this example, x squared minus 5x plus 3 equals 0. If we are going to use a method of factoring, we cannot do, or we cannot find the solution for this equation. It's because dili nato makuha ang middle term. Why? It's because the factor of 3 is only 3 and 1. Then any number na if i-divide, i-add, or i-minus nato sa 3, then dili nato makuha ang middle term or the linear term. So that's the time that we need to divert into another process. And that process is what we call the completing the square. Completing the square is simply completing this equation to a perfect square, to a perfect equation. So since this equation is not a perfect square, the linear term is a perfect square. I know the quadratic term is a perfect square. But how about the constant? Is it a perfect square? No. So that's why we need to make this equation to become a complete square. Okay? But unsaon na to pag buhatan na. Then, okay, here's the method. The first one is, let's try to change this general equation. Since it is equal to 0, then it is general equation. So let's try to change this equation into this general equation into standard equation. So x squared minus 5x, to change general to standard, the constant term will be in the left hand side, will be moved into right hand side. So x squared minus 5x equals, since our constant term is positive 3, from the left hand side, that if we move this one into the right hand side, that will become negative 3. And this time, we can now answer how the process of completing the square. So the first one is let the numerical coefficient of our linear term as our k. Again, the numerical coefficient of our linear term is the k value. In order to make this equation complete square, then we will have this kind of mathematical formulation. Okay. X squared minus k, since we're using negative sign, let's have positive. So plus k, or the numerical coefficient of our linear term, k times the variable x plus k over 2 squared. K over 2 squared to make this equation become perfect square. Okay? So, the quadratic equation is a perfect square. It's because squared ang atong x. Then, if we come up to this kind of term, then we can say that our constant term is a perfect square because of the exponent 2 in our constant. Then, equals the constant, which is c, since to make the equation remain balanced, then the whatever na atong gipuno sa atong third term, ato po na siyang whatever, like for example, whatever unsa atong gibutang sa atong left hand side, mapo na atong gibutang sa right hand side to make the equation balanced. So, c plus k over 2 raised to the power of 2. Okay? So going back to that example, x squared minus 5x equals negative 3. So let's copy x squared minus the numerical coefficient, which is 5x, then plus the k divided by 2, or the numerical coefficient of our linear term will be divided by 2. So k plus, let's have, okay, since the operation is negative, then our operation is also negative. Okay? So, negative. But since mag-deal man ta og square, then it will become positive. So, no need na siya in negative. So, positive ra gyapon ang atong ang atong operation in the constant term. Okay? So, that is plus then negative 5 divided by 2, pila? That is negative 5 over 2 squared. If we try to square this constant, then it will become positive. So ako lang siya i-put ang negative para mas dili ta maglibot. So negative 5 over 2 squared equals the constant of our quadratic equation, which is negative 3 plus negative 5 over 2 squared. squared. Okay? So now, we have this kind of equation. Then, as you can see, we already have the quadratic term and the constant term is perfect na siya. Perfect square na siya. Why? Because of the exponent 2. Since perfect square na siya, then we can now get the solutions of our quadratic equation. But before that, ato sa siya ipamubo ang ato equation. I-simplify. So, how we're going to simplify this one? X squared minus 5x plus negative 5 over 2 squared. Since wala man nato i-distribute ang squared, we can automatically copy negative 5 over 2. But if imo siyang i-distribute, then the factor of this equation is negative 5 over 2 gyapon. So may mo siyang 25, like for example, may mo siyang 25 over 4. So akong gitry og distribute ang atong exponent na to. Then the factor of this constant is equal to negative 5 over 2. So para mas masayon is dili na to i-distribute per ang square sa atong square ang exponent sa atong negative 5 over 2. Para ang negative 5 over 2 mao na siya ang atong last term sa atong binomial. So that is x. Then whatever the operation of your linear term, that would be your operation in your binomial. So since it is negative, then our operation is negative. Okay? So x minus 5 over 2 raised to the power of 2. So x minus 5 over 2 raised to the power of 2 equals, then you simplify our right hand side. Negative 3, then this one, that is positive 25 over 4. So negative 3 plus 25 over 4, to simplify that one by finding the LCD. The LCD between 1 and 4, that is equal to 4. 4 divided by 1, that is 4 times 3, that is negative 12 plus 25. Then negative 12 plus 25 over 4, that is equal to 13 over 4. So, to continue this process, that is x minus 5 over 2 to the power of 2, or x minus 5 over 2 to the power of 2 equals 13 over 4. Okay? 13 over 4. So, to find the solutions for this quadratic equation is by trying to extract the power of 2, extract square root, para mas ma-distribute na to siya. So, dili man ta ka-distribute ani, it's because of the power. So, kinahanglan na to siya i-extract by multiplying both sides, the left and the right side, by square root. So, multiply right hand side by square root, then for the right hand side, square root. Then we can now extract the exponent 2, so the remaining will be, okay, can I erase this one? The remaining will be x minus 5 over 2, since the exponent 2 and square root is makancel siya. So x minus 5 over 2 equals, then since we're dealing with positive and negative square root, so the answer for that is positive negative 13 over square root of 13 over 2. Since square root of 13 is not a perfect square, but 4 is a perfect square, that's why square root of 4 is equal to 2, and square root of 13 is remains square root of 13. to find the value of or to find the solutions for the quadratic equation, let's have x to the power x to the x sub 1 equals, since positive negative atong buhagon ang every operation. So let's start with the positive one. The square root of 13 over 2, then from minus 5 over 2 or the negative 5 over 2, transfer to the other side, that would be plus 5 over 2. So unsaon man na nato pag-add or pag-combine these two expressions. Since we have the same denominator, simply by copying the denominator, which is equal to 2. So x sub 1 is equal to, the denominator is 2, then square root of 13 plus 5 is equal to square root of 13 plus 5. And that's one of the solution of our quadratic equation. Now, let's have another solution. Kung saan man another solution. Since positive ang atong gamit at first, then this time is the negative side. So we have x sub 2 equals negative square root of 13 over 2 plus 5 over 2. So this one, dili siya ma-change. It's because ang negative ratong sign. Ato ra na siyang gibalhin. So x sub 2 equals negative square root of 13 over 2 plus 5 over 2. The same process, copy the denominator, which is 2, then 5 minus square root of 13. So this one, no sir, gano'n dili man siya 5 plus square root of 13. You can answer that one gihapon, but ako ra siyang diinani, it's because pwede ra nato mabalik-balik because we're using addition. But this time, since subtraction man natong gigamit, so una na ko ang 5 minus square root of 13. So the solution for this this quadratic equation is, for the x sub 1, that is square root of 13 plus 5 over 2. And for the x sub 2 is equal to 5 minus square root of 13 over 2. Okay, question. Okay, let's have another example. How about if we try to find. Okay, just wait for a while. Okay. What if we're trying to find the solutions of the quadratic equation using completing the square? If the equation is 3x minus 5, positive 4x minus 15 equals 0. 3x squared, rather. 3x squared plus 4x minus 15 equals 0. So, in completing the square, you take down note that you bear in mind the numerical or the quadratic term of our quadratic equation should be, the numerical coefficient of our quadratic term should be equal to 1. So, if the numerical coefficient of our quadratic term is greater than 1, then we can, let's try to simplify that one to make the numerical coefficient become equal to 1. So, how? By dividing the numerical coefficient of every term, the quadratic, linear, and constant term, by the numerical coefficient of our quadratic term. So 3x squared divided by 3. 3 is because the numerical coefficient of our quadratic term is equal to 3. Then 4x divided by 3. Then 15 divided by 3. So 3 divided by 3 cancel. So the remaining is x squared plus 4x over 3 minus 5 equals 0. Okay? So, since the numerical coefficient of our quadratic term is already equal to 1, then we can now proceed the process of completing the square. Again, we cannot use factoring. It's because the factor of 5 is, bisag sa factor sa 5 na itong gamiton, we cannot have the middle term or the linear term. So let's try to use completing the square. Again, the first step will be change the general equation into standard equation. So x squared plus 4x over 3, or let's have 4 over 3, x equals, from negative 5 transfer to the right hand side, that would be positive 5. So x squared plus 4 over 3x is equal to 5. Next, x squared plus 4 over 3x plus, again, sa buhaton, you try to divide the k or the numerical coefficient of our linear term by 2, then square. So 4 over 3, since our k is equal to 4 over 3, then if we divide that one by 2, or let's say, i-multiply na to by 1/2. That's the same thing with 4 over 3 divided by 2. So 4 over 3 times 1/2 is equal to, so let's have simple cancellation, cross multiply, 4 divided by 2, 4, 2 cancel, that is 2 and 1. So the remaining will be 2/3. Then again, since we need to the value of k raised to the power of 2, so 2/3 to the power of 2, that would be the value of our this area. So 2/3 raised to the power of 2 equals 5. Then whatever imong gibutang sa imong left hand side, that would be for the right hand side. So 5 plus 2 over 3 to the power of 2. Next, let's try to make this trinomials turn into binomial. Since it is perfect square already, pwede na natin siya mag-binomial. Okay? So next, so x squared plus whatever the operation of your linear term, that would be the operation of your binomial. So x squared plus 2/3, 2 over 3, x plus 2 over 3 to the power of 2. If we try to expand this binomial, that's the same thing with this trinomial. Parehara na sila. So x plus 2/3 squared equals, simplify the right hand side, 5 plus 4 over 9. Now sir, asa man gikan ang 4 over 9? We try to distribute the exponent 2 from numerator up to denominator. So 2 squared, that is 4, then 3 squared, that is equal to 9. Then another way in solving this kind of expression is by simply cross multiplying. So since the 5, the whole number 5 has a denominator which is equal to 1 plus 4 over 9, let's do the butterfly method. Instead of using the finding the LCD, let's try the new one, which is what we call the butterfly method. What's the butterfly method? So, from this side to this side, you multiply, and this side to this side, you multiply. Then to find the LCD of these two fractions is by multiplying 9 and 1, the denominator rather of every fraction. So 5 times 9